It's Scorpio season, the veil's feeling thin, where endings and openings dance once again. The candles are flickering, data streams hum, witches and algorithms beating one drum. From cauldrons to code, the magic's evolved. Old ways dissolve, new puzzles get solved. We're wired and wild, both human and star. One hand on the circuit, one hand on the scar. Intentions are signals, realities tuned to the frequency we consciously attune. Nature still whispers through fiber and flame, reminding our powers not here to be tamed. The spell is awareness, the craft is our play. Let's talk how it works, the Aquarian way. The idea for this episode came because I was reflecting on what my unique relationship to and version of witchcraft is. As you may or may not know, I am branded Cosmic Biz Witch. And it's always been interesting to own that and to be connected with that as an archetype in my brand because my relationship to it is not traditional. It's different. And feeling into how those differences really, I think, come down to me being so Aquarian and that nothing I do is very conventional or traditional. Most every way that I approach anything is very individualistic, is some kind of experimentation, some kind of play to find what's mine and what really works for me. And my relationship to witchcraft is no different, which, as an Aquarian, is also very woven with the times, the technology, the tools that are available to us in this modern day and age that I think is all part and parcel of my unique positioning around the practice of witchcraft. And I actually put it into kind of a succinct blurb that I want to head this episode with, and then continue, obviously, to flesh out in various ways to unpack what I mean here. I define Aquarian Age witchcraft as our relationship to the unseen forces that animate this world and to our not yet manifest vision for our reality here through the lens of our wiring that makes sense of it to experience and engage it. And this creates the opening then that this episode is about my personal relationship to witchcraft that also kind of naturally creates an invitation as what Aquarian Age witchcraft is, and this invitation to everyone that is here and a part of this time to evolve with it in the ways that I have come to orient to it as someone that is so Aquarian. Because we're in an era where consciousness has Wi Fi, where the unseen really does, if you're paying attention, speak in algorithms, in synchronicities, and in pings. It's all so intricately connected, where the witch, once upon a time, the archetype that we know, no longer hides in the woods in her hovel or castle, right? She builds in the cloud, but her magic is still rooted in earth. And this episode is just as much how important it is to maintain that connection. She still breathes with the elements. She still remembers that energy is matter and that intention is code. Because witchcraft isn't just about specific spells anymore. It's about systems, it's about awareness, and it's about the sacred circuitry, if you will, that connects us all. In this episode, we're going to get into why traditional witchcraft still feels like home for me and what happens when an Aquarian rewrites the spell or the script, how synchronicity and serendipity are the new sigils of our time, what it means to hold creative power in a world of AI, algorithms, and amplified energy. Everything's getting turned up and sped up. Why staying rooted in nature and in the elements is the most radical tech hygiene we have. how the dark and the light both live in all of us, and what happens when you integrate them before the world forces you to. And how all of this, the magic, the matter, the mystery that Scorpio points to, is simply the practice of being in relationship with what you can't yet see. This is the season of the witch. If you're listening to this right after it aired, we just had Halloween, and the atmosphere is that Scorpio season, spookiness, veil thinning time when the collective curiosity about and connection to witches and witchcraft is at its peak. So, no wonder this is where my reflections are going and why this episode was born. So, I want to speak for a minute just to really personalize my resonance with and connection to that archetype of Scorpio, of the witch, that for me has always felt so familiar, second nature, ancestral, insofar as it's a relationship of me to my past versions of myself, past lineages. And I've always attributed this to that my South Node is in Scorpio, in the first house. So if you're not familiar with the South Node, that's like your past life remembrance and roots, and what feels, again, kind of like second nature, almost like unconsciously obvious to you. And so, because of that, all things witch related in the realm of Scorpio were never anything for me in this life that I felt like I had to learn. Like, it always felt like some kind of remembrance, like the spells, the modalities, all of the aspects of what I would come across as traditional witchcraft didn't feel compelling to me in like a, oh, I need to learn this, right? It was more like, oh yeah, that feels very close to home. So whether it's in, rituals, in sigils, in the language and orientation toward intention setting and relationship with energy, or for me, another big one has always been like tending altars and how I organize my spaces, and how that has always felt like a spiritual practice for me to do that, which my moon is in Virgo. So I've always seen that as part of that placement of my birth moment. And that I've always just felt in relationship to my intentions that are then, of course, connected to that which I don't yet have, can't yet see, but feel a connection with, some future timeline that I'm calling here now by putting myself in that as if it's present. And for me as well, all of my Aquarius, which is obviously a big theme in this episode of my relationship to these things as well, is in my third house of communication, of the words that we use. So a well-crafted intention has always felt so powerful to me. And of course, spells are spoken, it's the root of the word spelling and points to the power of our words to create our reality. So all of this, again, has just always felt so natural to me. But of course, as is the topic of this episode, thanks to my Sun and Mercury and Jupiter all being in Aquarius, what's actually felt authentic to me this life, alongside and almost as an evolution of or extension of that familiarity with witchcraft, is like doing it my own way. And just like with anything else, like not really feeling all that much desire to embrace tradition, right? An example of this, there was a time that I created something called astroglyphs, and it very much felt like a version of sigils that I would create based on the astrological symbols of the moment. So the prominent planets and signs, I would bring them all together digitally, of course, and create one sigil glyph that I called an astroglyph, to be able to connect more deeply with the energetics of the moment. So, even my art, it's just felt so infused with everything that I've done that it's been some albeit alternative form of spell work. And also through my digital design, which is a huge part of my artistic expression. From even when I was a little kid, I was blessed to have a grandpa that like always had the newest software, and I would create digital art on the computer screen. And that process, that creative process of design has always carried this like knowing intentional frequency for me as well. So takeaway here being, I wanted to share that while traditional witchcraft feels like home for me, that my expression of it has always felt like it belongs to a different age, right? And maybe this Aquarian one, as you will soon see, and with the invitation that I'm opening through my experience of what witchcraft has come to meet for me. So I'm talking about this bridge between the familiar and the future, which again, for me, my personal relationship with that bridge has always felt like a connection between my Scorpio, which is my south node there, Saturn, Pluto, and my rising sign, and all in the first house here. I do have Pluto in the 12th, but in the first house here of like not just the witch, which is Scorpio, but first house, like witch in her castle, right? Like a very like solo, personal kind of place and experience of that archetype in relationship to that Aquarian, Sun, Mercury, Jupiter wiring in my third house of communication. So while I have like a deep reverence and love for and honoring of the old ways, the herbs, the symbols, the circle, the way that we cast the spells in a very specific way to be able to manifest what we desire, my magic this life is wired a little bit differently. And of course, not every witch fits the stereotype of the archetype, but I'm going to run with it to differentiate myself as well in that I don't seek mystery and secrecy, right? A big reason why I am visible online and my brand is Cosmic Bizwitch, and it's a very outward facing, world connecting, systems oriented way that I relate to the mystery and my relationship to it. And I don't feel like I need to do certain specific rituals, like, lighting candles to summon. I feel like for me, it's more of coding my intentions through my processes, right? Through my Virgo mundane life and my thought patterns that feel so connected to the frequencies that I'm wanting to manifest my reality through. I know, Aquarian weirdo here, but magic for me feels less about casting and more about connecting and authentically liberating and knowing myself through my desires and kind of, in an Aquarian way, those like left field thoughts and sparks that come through that make me realize like, oh, I didn't even know that was in there, but like, yes, and more, please. So it really is just like, evolution itself. Not the old way was wrong, this new way is right. Evolution is always to include and transcend, right? To bring with and adapt and evolve into the future that we're moving into. So the Aquarian witch does not reject the old ways. She reprograms them for herself, her unique orientation and individuality, as well as for the collective circuitry. Now, I want to move into the idea of synchronicity as the new sigil. So, I mentioned that Scorpio South Node in the first house, my past life, I was a witch in her castle, right? Removed from society and head down in my alchemy, in my spells, in whatever I was working on and focusing on. Traditionally, witchcraft was more of a private alchemy, exception, of course, being the covens and the crafts and the ways that we came together. But it was not a very public thing, right? For obvious reasons. But We have images of the archetype with the cauldron in the lab, in the dimly lit room where transformation was brewed more or less in isolation. But in the Aquarian age, the proverbial cauldron is everywhere. And this is why my focus now is less on zeroing in on something like a sigil to focus my energy and my magic, but more about my relationship to synchronicity and serendipity, and how whatever my focus is, through like a hall of mirrors kind of electricity, is actually connected to every other thing. And when I can see and be with my intention in a way that I see it everywhere and in everything, that is how I relate to synchronicity and serendipity. And it feels like such a cornerstone for me of my relationship to and my version of practicing witchcraft. So, not something that I specifically isolate into, drawing in ink, using the example of the sigil here, but something that gets revealed through my interactions and my experiences, so that when I'm in the world and exposed to new inputs and letting myself bump up against life and life bump up against me, the magic happens in my reflections, in those little pings, and in the resonance that I feel through those little micro revealings. So, in this way, the world itself is now the ritual space and stage, and reality at large is the new spell circle. So, I want to offer this Aquarian reframe around conscious co creation. One of the tenets of the age of Aquarius that we're entering into is unity through diversity. So, having an intimate and authentic relationship to you and your path and the way you think and perceive the world, and not needing to conform. We left the age of Pisces, where to be in community was about conforming. Enter the cult and everybody dressed in white robes and talking and speaking the same, or even the new age community that I was a part of for a time, where we weren't wearing white, we were wearing psychedelic inspired clothing, but we all did kind of dress the same and talk about the same things, right? So stepping away from that into a very individual, unique expression of what it means to be you. And then through that, to be able to connect with each other from that place. So, a new octave of community, unity through diversity. And I really think that that's such a big part of the shift, right? Like, it used to be that to really be in connection with that part of yourself, that deeply authentic version of you that maybe wouldn't fit in the world at large, you had to be more in a bubble. You had to create these circles to step inside of, to really be able to let your magic out and be in relationship with it. But now the Aquarian age witch knows that reality is responsive. We are living in a different time, and it's a time where everybody is invited to participate. You don't have to identify as a witch to be connected with these things, to be a co-creator, a conscious co-creator of your reality and the one that we're all sharing. And so, what used to be framed in specific ways around how spells are designed to influence and manifest in certain ways, that idea of intentional influence, a very powerful one, is something that I think is being democratized essentially, or not sure what the word is, but it's no longer the realm of just the specifically archetypal or traditional witch. It's something available to everyone, and it's how we all are able to co-create with the universe as living beings embodied here, not just witnessing it, not falling victim to it. And so I hope this episode as well serves as a reminder of, regardless of what your relationship is to witchcraft, which likely you didn't make it far in this episode if you have an aversion to it, That said, if you did, hi, welcome, glad you're here. You don't have to be a witch to play this game. And just like witches cast spells, knowing their power to influence the elements that make up this realm, we all have the potential, the capability to shape reality through our consciousness, through intentional design, and through where we place our attention, which, if you haven't been paying any, that is one of the most valuable currencies of this modern digital age. And Aquarian Age witchcraft isn't about control. When we think of the archetype of the witch, if you don't identify as one, you probably think of dark or black magic and manipulation and spell casting to wield our influence, even if it isn't for the greater good or the object of our spell would not agree or choose it or be in consent. That is not the kind of witchcraft that I'm talking about here. It's not about control, it's about collaboration. And it's ultimately the practice of knowing that you are a variable in every equation of your life and trusting that awareness enough to play your role with care, with curiosity, and with responsibility, the responsibility that comes with that knowing. If this conversation is lighting something up in you, if you are feeling your own wiring in all of this, if you feel like I'm speaking to you, come join me inside the Cosmic Current. It's my weekly newsletter love drop on money, on magic, and on cosmic alignment with the transits, the cosmic currents. As a business owner, a way to stay synced up with your own rhythm, with the cosmic cycles, and with your reality as the stars keep shifting. Because this is what we do there. We practice Aquarian Age witchcraft in real time, noticing, aligning, and co-creating with intention the world we want to live in and the business vehicles we want to be traveling through. Next up, I want to share a little bit more about my personal experience and relationship to all of this, which is that for me, it's all about the direct experience. And for me, that came in big part through my history and exploration with psychedelics and the presence and personal power that that connected me with. It was many, many moons ago, but it shaped me in a really big way. And because of it, my relationship to the unseen, which is what we're talking about here, whatever your personal flavor or style is, I think ultimately witchcraft is just that. And that mine was liberated through a direct experience, particularly again through psychedelics. And those journeys, those trips that I went on, they stripped away any, programming, outside influence, any kind of intermediaries that kept me from that own personal experience and ultimately gave me time and time again a firsthand access to the divine. It became a big part of my spirituality. And I want to draw the parallel here to a big part of the context of the historical witch was similarly motivated. It was a rejecting of the institutional gatekeepers, the mass religions, and choosing to connect directly with the forces of life, with ourselves, and with the relationship between them. That is where, in my experience, real power comes from. And so I wanted to share my angle of it that, again, I think at its core, witchcraft was born through this rejecting of a spiritual middleman, and my Aquarian version of that, to each their of it, being liberated and unlocked through my journeying with psychedelics. But whether through that or ceremony or breath or other visionary states or modalities, I think that the essence of witchcraft is direct relationship with the mystery and its unfolding and revealing. And that ultimately, I think it's all about spell spells as this process of becoming, and this relationship, just like in alchemy, where it was a mirror of transformational and transmutational processes of those happening in our own inner world, in our own inner journey and process, and how that feels like magic, especially each in their own right, but then to experience them in reflection to each other, in relationship to each other, that they are operating similarly. As within, so without are altars to our processes. So that ultimately, I think the Aquarian Age is inviting diverse and unique versions of this, right? Like, again, to each their own, whatever it is for you, but that ultimately it's about a process, an experience, a relationship with intention and manifestation. It comes down to, at the root, at the foundation, being that simple. And that for me, while, as I said, I do feel this very deeply coded and ingrained reverence for traditional witchcraft, but that for me in this life, when I have done spells by way of those traditions, to me, it's just felt almost like bypassing the process that I need to go through that makes me feel so intimately connected with what I'm calling in. And it's almost like there's an emotional arc that I need to go on that for me, I end up distracting myself from if I engage in these specific ways, but that those do a similar thing to the process that works for me, where ultimately it's a process of going through these different aspects, like a journey of your relationship to the thing that you want, to the thing that you're envisioning and calling in. And you can do that ritually through spell work, or you can do that in lots of other ways. For me, it looks like a process of almost like the 5 stages of grief. It's not necessarily linear, but where I witness myself in relationship to the thing through longing, right? And almost like the desperation of wanting it so bad, or through the doubts that I have around it, or feeling unworthy or like it's not possible, through the illumination of some of the beliefs or thought patterns or things that might be wired and in the way that I need to move through and reprocess and rewire, through a process of surrender ultimately to forces bigger than and beyond my control that want to support me for the cause of what I'm calling in, and ultimately always landing in this space of neutral knowing that it is so. It is so. When you cast a spell, you are going through a process, a similar reflection of a process, like a symbolic engaging in this process that ultimately lands you in the neutral knowing that the spell has been cast and it's inevitable and only a matter of time before it then manifests what you've called in, that neutral knowing, which for me, it just doesn't take me there to cast a spell this life in the traditional ways. I go through a different process to get to that similar place, but that ultimately it's a place of calm conviction. It is so, and so it will be. And it is the point, as I've seen, where the magic does materialize. It's the threshold from that inner process that we need to go through to putting it out there and it returning back to us threefold, tenfold, whatever fold, to bring us what we need and want. So for the Aquarian witch, manifestation does not have to go through any certain process. There are no rules to how this needs to happen. The journey itself is the spell, whatever that looks like for you, to get to that point of calm conviction and neutral knowing that it is so. I mentioned in the beginning, I am so connected with technology and so many future facing things that feel very deeply connected to my spirituality, my connection to myself, my practice of witchcraft. But that said, there is still such a necessity of something that the old ways were absolutely drenched in and inseparable from, and that is the earth connection, which is ever more important now to stay connected with in this increasingly digital world. As we expand through AI, through the algorithms, through the information age, our stability depends on staying synced with the natural cycles, with the seasons, with the moon, with the four elements and the four directions. These aren't relics of old world witchcraft. They are the OG operating system through which, without them, magic does not exist. It is the alignment with them, with the mirror of those forces, with the material manifestation of those invisible but existing forces that makes magic possible. And when I say it's your relationship with the unseen, such a big part of it is how we're able to anchor into it through those natural cycles and rhythms and orientations. And it's not something that we can escape from. Again, transcend and include. We're not leaving it behind. It's something where we almost need to have, as we reach for the future, one foot always in the soil, like a foot in both worlds, to be able to really stay relevant as witches in the Aquarian age. I mentioned that for me, I'm a little bit of an Aquarian weirdo when it comes to my relationship with technology, somewhat akin to a beloved obsession. But for me, the digital realm is absolutely a mirror of consciousness. And I think that AI can be used for so many things, but it can be used as an oracle, as a tool that amplifies our own intuition, our reflections, our ability to make connections between things and to co-create the reality and to envision what we're calling in when, again, we approach it intentionally, consciously. These tools can accelerate our self-knowledge, our creative expression, the gap between identifying something in the unseen and making it real and manifest in the material. These things are not antithetical to magic. They have the capacity to be an extension of it. I acknowledge as well, they have the capacity to, it goes both ways. Everything's being amplified and they can be used for dark as well as for light. Darkness scales just as easily as light does, and that amplification goes both ways. But as I see it, the future is magical, but only if we enter into it with self-intimacy, awareness, and discernment. I want to circle back to Scorpio, the age of the witch, the Scorpio season that this episode is airing in, and that the witch archetype has always held both creation and destruction, light and dark. And I'm speaking in this episode to the necessity of knowing both within yourself, because the expansion that we're living through right now, the opening of AI and everything that's speeding up and hurling us toward it, it honestly is just amplifying whatever's active. So without self-relationship, technology becomes a kind of possession, right? But with self-relationship, it becomes a tool and a very powerful one. So it's all about integration to protect yourself from these potentially troublesome dark possibilities and to ultimately be at cause for wholeness toward yourself against that. So I mentioned this is just as much a share and a revealing of my relationship with magic as it is an invitation. We are no longer isolated mystics. This is the age of Aquarius. We are networked magicians. Witchcraft is no longer just a rebellion. It is a remembrance of our role as co-creators, and it is a huge part of the age that we are all entering into. I want to invite everyone listening to this episode to just keep practicing this awareness, most importantly, in whatever way works for you. To see every thought, every choice, every synchronicity that comes into your field as an ongoing dialogue with creation, because that shit multiplies. It creates momentum, and ultimately, whatever your version of it, The spell of the witch is awareness. The craft is our play and experimentation, and we are all wired for witchcraft the Aquarian way. We truly are living in wild, wondrous times where reality is listening, where the invisible is updating in real time through us, and that's the real Aquarian spell. So stay conscious while the world recodes, play your role, and keep one hand on the earth and one in the ethers. You do not have to know every step, you do not have to be taught every aspect of how you do this. You just need to stay in relationship with whatever is being revealed to you. That's the work. That's the gift. And that's what it means to be wired for witchcraft, which I believe we all are. Maybe not by name, call it what you want. So keep watching for reality's winks, the ripples of what you've put out there, the reflections that are trying to communicate back to you through everything. And if you want a space to keep tending that rhythm, to stay in right relationship and alignment to those cycles as they turn, you already know where to go. The cosmic current is waiting for you, a reminder that your magic still matters and that the world is listening, especially as a business owner. We are creating our reality every single day. You can subscribe to the Cosmic Current by going to cosmicb.link/current.